So you're very welcome to another edition of the Weekend Mix, a chat with. And today my guest needs no introduction. We normally see her on, if it's on the television on RTE Sport, we're listening to her on the radio on RTE1 Sport. It's of course Jacqui Hurley. Jacqui, how are you?
I'm great. How are you getting on?
I'm doing good, thank you. Jacqui, you were born, we'll go back to the very start. You were born in the middle 80s down in Cork. And at an early age, your mum and dad decided to head to Australia.
Yeah, it's funny because so many people are doing it now that you kind of realize what life must have been like for them back then in the 80s, going through a recession and deciding that they wanted a different life. But to be honest, it's what made our lives. You know, I think now about just the childhood that we were given, the opportunity that we were given, and just the way that it opened our minds was unbelievable. Like, to me, it was the best possible start in life. I'm sure my mum and dad, there was massive difficulties with all the things that they missed between weddings and parties and just, you know, life in Ireland. Like, they missed Ireland desperately. But the start that it gave us in life and the way our upbringing was unbelievable because of it.
Of course, yeah. And I suppose when you're a 3 or 4 year old, you don't remember much about going over. But I'd imagine you had 6 or 7 years of roots set down. You had friends met over there. You had a life over there. I suppose essentially Australia was home to you growing up as a child. It must have been very hard for you to come back home.
Oh, completely. Like, Australia was my home. Like, my mum and dad said I didn't even talk to them when we came home for about a year. They said I was horrendous to live with because I was just, you're absolutely right. You'd set your roots down there. I thought that this was going to be my life. And then suddenly they tell you, actually, we're moving across the other side of the world. And this is a point as well where you're never going to see your friends again, because like right now, social media, the world in which we live in, lots of people have FaceTime, the world has changed. But this is 1994, we're moving home to Ireland, and at that point you're literally just ripping it up and you're saying bye-bye to that life. So like, it was traumatic is actually the way that I would describe it. And also for us, we had already started playing our sport. We had kind of found our niche. And like, I just found that whole thing difficult. It was like ripping off a Band-Aid and saying to a child, look, you're moving away from that life. So it definitely took me at least a year to recover from that.
And of course, you touched off, but a child being so young doesn't have a choice in that then as well. You're told literally the Band-Aid is coming off and you're going, that's it. In sports as well, Jacqui, of course. Netball, you were big in netball over in Australia. And that was your main sport, I believe, is it?
Yeah, it was.
Over in Australia, yeah.
That's the big thing about what had kind of set us down, set our roots over there, was that we were all playing sport, you know. So for myself and my sister, netball was the big one, was huge in Australia. It's not really that big here. So when we came back to Ireland, that was another thing that we were like, well, look, they don't even have netball here. Like, what are we supposed to play? And actually, it's funny, it was only when we went to secondary school that our PE teacher at the time, Miss Warren, had noticed that my sister was incredibly athletic, and she was like, look, this girl needs to be playing basketball. And then when Trina started playing, she was like, oh, she has all the attributes already. And we were explaining to her, well, look, this kid has played netball. And then when I came along, she was saying, well, look, we know that this crowd can play with the ball. So it fit then that we started playing the basketball. And actually we were playing GAA at home as well, and we'd never played that, you know. But in Ballinhassig, when we were introduced to that, it's actually sport is the thing that settled us down in Ballinhassig. I'd say if we didn't have sport, our lives would have probably been much more difficult for mum and dad to make us settle into the new roots and all that. But basketball and the GAA definitely helped with that for us.
And I guess, I suppose it's like everything. It's like nowadays, I think the primary school kind of introduces the GAA element in for you, and of course the club, the local club, and in secondary school, as you said, introduced the basketball for you. And you went on to play both county level in Camogie for Cork, and also for Ireland in basketball, which is fantastic.
Yeah, listen, it was great. It was I think when you're a kid, you just want to play sport, and then it's only when you get a bit older then you start to kind of recognize, okay, maybe I'm good at this, or maybe a teacher tells you could be good at this. And we were very lucky in that my mum and dad, the minute we got good at something or we asked for something, they were incredibly supportive. Like, you know, for example, when myself and my sister both made the Irish basketball team, we knew we were going to have a daily program that we had to complete. So my father was like, what's it going to take? What do you need? So we said, look, we probably need more access to a basketball court. So with his bare hands, he built a basketball court in the backyard, you know. Wow. And like, I'm sure there's loads of dads in Ireland who'd love to be able to do that for their kids, but like money, it wasn't a money thing. Like we certainly didn't have loads of money when I was a kid, but what my dad had was a huge amount of application to the job. Like, so if it needed to be done, he'd find a way to do it. So he just went out, took the shovel out, started digging into the ground, and then got a rake of cement, built it, and like made the backboard with his bare hands, the whole lot. And like that was sort of what it was for us. It was just our parents saying, look, what's it going to take? And then likewise, when I started playing camogie, obviously I only took it up when I was 10. I'd never played it, but my father was just like, look, you know, learn the skills. If you get good at the game, I'll be there. And then he became chairman of the camogie club just to kind of help us integrate with it all as well. And like, even though he was a football man by trade primarily, but later in life, he totally got involved. And actually having our parents being that supportive is what made the difference for us.
As a dad myself, I can relate to that definitely. Going through secondary school, Jacqui, had you a plan in mind what you want to do going through when you finished secondary school?
I had an idea that I wanted to work in sport. I had kind of thought maybe I wanted to be a PE teacher as a backup. Like English was probably my best subject, and I thought maybe I'd be a PE and English teacher. But that was kind of do you know, kids have an idea of like, I'm going to put this on the CAO, but sometimes if you ask a kid, what's your dream? I would have said my dream was to do the job that I'm doing, but it wasn't as realistic back then. So I probably in my head thought, sure, look, I'll put PE and English on the CAO, but maybe I really want to be a sports presenter. But then when I spoke to my mom, she was just like, if you want to be a sports presenter, put that on the CAO. And I was like, well, you know, like Sister Nora, who was the career guidance teacher in school, a lovely lady, but a nun. And like, she couldn't see in her life that she had built as a nun. I suppose she hadn't had the same sort of exposure to it that I had. She had said to me, look, Jacqui, you don't have a hope of this. This is not a career like for a young girl. It's not going to happen. So you need a backup. And she was the one who was saying to me, I think you'd be a very good PE teacher. Maybe you should put that on the CAO. So she had kind of put that in my head, and I thought that that's where my career was going. But it was actually my mom saying to me, look, go for your dream. And if it doesn't work out, then, you know, have a number 2 and a number 3 or whatever. And like, I suppose it was probably through that encouragement that I just said, you know what, I'm going to go for this. And sure, look, if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work.
Exactly. And you ended up in Limerick for your sins, Jacqui. In Mary I. And
sure, look at all the things that I gained out of going to college in Limerick. I got a dream job. I got an amazing husband and 2 fantastic children that came from my time in Limerick. So like for me, Limerick is actually kind of what made my life really. It's it's amazing what one life decision will do for you. But I kind of found that like just that simple idea, once it was in my head of this is achievable, I just went wholeheartedly at it then, and I never looked back. Like Mary I, to me, the reason I chose that course was because there was a huge practical element to it. So there was plenty of courses on offer where you could do all the theory in the world, but the thing that drew me to that course in Mary I was actually that for your 3rd year you could go away and you could do an off-campus year, and you could either study or work abroad. And I knew that by going and working in the industry for a year, it would give me massive chance to have a career at this. And that's why I chose that course. And to be honest, it is probably, of all the life decisions that I have ever made, taking that college course instead of others and going to Limerick is without a shadow of a doubt the best decision I've ever made in my life.
Brilliant, brilliant. And of course it was media and English degree, a degree in media and English that you did, was it? Brilliant.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
No, good stuff. I read somewhere, Jacqui, I'm not sure was it in secondary school or 3rd level, but you wrote a quote, and it amazed me. The voice of one would never stretch far without the ears of many. What was going through your head when you wrote that?
Geez, you did well to find that. I wrote that in my Leaving Cert year. I don't know where it came from. I actually wrote it in my mocks. It was this essay that I was writing about capital punishment, actually. And it was just, I was arguing against capital punishment as a principle, really, you know. And I was just saying, look, this is never going to change, but the voice of one will never stretch far without the ears of many. And little did I know at the time that this was actually going to become like part of my whole kind of life, really, like that's the way this thing works. But I've always loved the English language, and I've always just sort of loved just the way that you write your feelings on a piece of paper, and that's how it works. And I wrote that, and actually after I wrote it, I used to have this quote wall when I was in Limerick, and like all my favorite quotes from like just different authors, and loads of different, you just see different quotes through time and through history. I had them all on my wall, but in the middle of them I always had that one that I had written, because it was just always sort of profound to me, that I just thought after that, and after I read it, and like I suppose the essay did well, and it got published afterwards and all that, and it always stayed with me. This is something that just came to me, and it was my words, and it was important to me, so I always wanted to keep them. And I have a diary that I keep every year, and I always write it in the front of the diary, because it's always important to me. So and listen, like that's, so long ago. I think I was like 18 when I wrote that.
We won't say how many years ago it was.
It's amazing though. But it's just amazing how something like that you write becomes so important to you, and you don't even know why.
But it is like it's like your own mantra, for the want of a better word. It's something that's it's deep inside in you, and it's relevant to everyday life. Like, it's fantastic. It's a fantastic line. Fair play to you.
Exactly. That's exactly the way that I feel about it.
And you're dead right, as you say. You carry it forward in your diaries and everything. It's fantastic. Year 3 in college in Mary I, you got to go to Mississippi. You worked with CBS, did you?
Yeah, my uncle lives over there, and I kind of knew that he knew the sports director at the television station down there. So I kind of thought, like, look, maybe I'll get onto Juror, and I might go the local avenue, because I'd actually been offered an internship with InStyle magazine in New York for that year as well.
Well,
but I kind of felt
one.
like, look, which would have been amazing. And it was really difficult at the time, because there's a big part of me that wanted to go to New York and go to InStyle magazine, but I kind of was slightly worried that I would be photocopying and making tea. And like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm sure I would have learned loads, but the bigger part of me thought, why would you go to New York and make tea when you could go to Mississippi and make television? So I got onto my uncle's Juror, and I just said, look, would you ever put in a call to your man who runs the sports department there and just ask him, would he take me? And he said, look, they said they'll take you, but they don't pay interns. And I know that your internship has to be paid. Like, it was part of the college kind of whole ethos that we don't really do unpaid work. They don't want journalists to feel like it's a free for all. So one of the college's sort of implementations early on was, look, we only do paid internships. So I got onto the WCBI, said they would take me, but they said, look, we won't pay you, but what we will do is we will give you extra work that's paid if you want. So at the weekends, if you want to pick up some extra shifts, you can run camera, or you can do auto cue or whatever, but your internship won't be paid. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'll do whatever you want. If you want me to work 100 hours a week, I'll do it, So the agreement was that they would pay me €150 a week, and I would do as many hours as humanly possible. But to be honest, for me, like, I learned everything, because when I went over there, I was basically like filing copy, learning how to do all that. But then all of a sudden they were like, go out there on that story. We used to have a Friday night football show. It was like a high school football show. They started sending me out to that. And then by the end of it, I was on air. Like, so, by the time I came back to college, like, I could do all of the jobs that loads of my peers could only dream about. So like, that is really the reason that I got my job later in life. It's because by the time I finished college, I was probably slightly ahead of the curve, purely because of that experience.
That experience, of course, as you said, and you've done every job across the board, which it really helped you down the road, as you said. Like, it was a fantastic opportunity for you. And of course, it was a massive, as you said, it was a massive thing to decide between, will I go to New York or will I go to, and you probably have more Irish in New York than you would Mississippi as well.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, nobody would have batted an eyelid if I'd have said, look, I'm going to go to New York, because at the end of the day, like, I still would have had a phenomenal experience there. And who's to say I wouldn't still be doing the same career that I'm doing now? It's just, for me, when you are 19 years of age, which I was at the time, and somebody says to you, you need to make a decision about what do you think is going to be better for your future. Just, to me, the reason I had chosen that degree is because there was a practical element of it. I just didn't want to waste the practical element by going to New York and not feeling like I gave it my absolute all. And like, I know in my heart and soul that the decision that I made was the right one for me, but for 40 other people, it could be completely the wrong decision. But it gave me the grounding that I needed.
Brilliant, brilliant. You went on and of course you got your degree then. Did it take long for you to join RTE after that, or what was it? That was the dream job. RTE was the dream job, I'd imagine.
Oh yeah, listen, like I always, RTE was completely the dream. When I started going out with my husband Shane at the time, who I know is a neighbour of yours at home, we actually went up to a Munster when Munster beat Leinster in the Heineken Cup semi-final in 2006. We had started going out earlier, kind of that year at the time, and we went up to the semi-final. And I remember we passed RTE on the way to the match at the Aviva, and he said to me, you know, you'll work there someday. And like I remember passing it, going, God, like wouldn't that be just great? Like that would be the absolute dream. And I think that was April 2006. And then in July, I got a phone call. I had sent in a tape. It was like one of these. I was in fourth year in college and I had sent in a tape. They were doing a talent call. They wanted like some new contributors. And I just sent in a tape, and I got a phone call in the July from this producer called Teresa Smith. And she said, look, I saw your tape. We'd love you to come and audition for TTV. We you know, we're looking for contributors. And I went up and auditioned. And then she said, look, you know, you have the job. What do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about celebrity gossip, or do you want to talk about sport? And I said to her, well, sport. And she was like, well, look, you know, it's your choice. You can have either slot. And again, it's one of those life decisions. Like, do you go with InStyle or do you go with Mississippi? Like for me, this was the same. I had the chance to talk about celebrity gossip, which again, you know, huge amount of TV, loads of hours in it. Or do you want to go sport? And like for me, sport was the only choice, because it's my passion. It's who I am. But also there's a longevity in the career where, you know, sport is going to be around forever. Celebrity gossip, I mean, maybe people tire of that. I don't know. But like for me, again, it was a simple decision, because this is the life that I wanted.
It's like all your stars were aligned at that time, you know. It's fantastic.
Totally.
I guess you done that for 3 years, and after 3 years in that position, you became RTE's first lady Radio 1 sports presenter in the history of RTE, which was unbelievable. That must really have put the hair standing on the back of your neck, Jacqui.
Yeah, and you know, the mad thing is, Damien, I didn't know about that until a journalist rang me. They were doing a story for the newspaper, and they said, how does it feel to be the first ever female presenter of Sunday Sport? And I said, what are you talking about? And they were like, you know, that's the headline piece. And I was like, God, it didn't even dawn on me, you know. Like what I was more worried about was that I was the youngest ever presenter, because I was only 25 at the time, and I was literally going from reading 4-minute sports bulletins to presenting 4-hour programs. And I was actually kind of worried that I wouldn't know what to do. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to fill 4 hours of radio? Like, thankfully, I was working with Con Murphy, who's one of the best in the business, and he really showed me the ropes. But I was actually really worried about that element. So I didn't even have time to think about being the first woman. But then when somebody puts that on your shoulders, you are thinking, geez, I don't want to make a balls of this, because I'm sure there's a whole load of women coming behind me who are thinking, oh my God, like the first one was useless, and then the rest of them were grand after that. So, you know, there's an element of just trying to get it right. But look, thankfully, everything has been great since. But it was definitely, it was a kind of a very strange start to that, knowing that was the environment you're walking into.
Well, I mean, you really hit the highest pedestal you could in what you wanted to do with your career, like, which is brilliant. You've often spoke openly about the whole equality in sport between men and women. And I read in my research, I read somewhere where you took your son Luke out with his friend one day, and the conversation of boys are better or girls are better came up. And that kind of set you back when you heard the response from the girl.
Yeah, it really did, because this is, you know, in my household, boys and girls sport was always equal. You know, I have an older sister and a younger brother, and my parents never, ever treated any of our sport differently. So it's only as you get older, you kind of start to recognize the differences. And like for me, I have a son and I have a daughter, and I want them to both have an equal upbringing, you know, in sport and everything else as well. And so when I was at the zoo, and my little boy Luke, who's 6 now, he was 5 at the time, And he was talking to his little friend Ivana, and she was only 7. And I heard her saying, you know, girls are better, boys are better, girls are better, boys are better. This is the debate that was going on. And then I heard her saying to Luke, yeah, Luke, you're right, boys are better. And like that really pricked my ears, because I was thinking, what's going on here? And I went over and I said, Ivana, why do you think why do you think boys are better? And she said, well, boys matches are on TV. And like, it actually broke my heart, because I thought, first of all, girls matches are on TV now. And this little girl needs to know that if she wants to play football and she wants to play on TV, that's possible now, which is a huge thing. But also, isn't it sad that society has already taught a 7-year-old girl that her sport is not equal to a boy's sport? And look, I'm not going to sit here and pontificate and say that we live in an equal society and everything should be right and all that. I understand the realities of it, that there's reasons why it maybe isn't equal now, but it would be nice to live in a place where a girl can feel that she can grow up to be a professional sports person and she can earn a living, because there's an awful lot of professional athletes in this country who are girls who now do earn a decent living out of it. And I'd like to think that by the time my daughter is at their level, that maybe things will be even better. And I think that is a realistic thought.
Oh, definitely, 100%.
And I think the way that they play and the way that they interact with each other, that's how we change it. Because like I see my kids play on the road with a whole load of boys and girls, and actually it's not on the road that starts. We actually do that, and we do it like completely subconsciously. You don't even see it. It's actually in schools. It's the way with language we talk to boys and the way we talk to girls. Like even like I've just finished writing a book at the moment. It's like it's a kind of a fairy tale book for girls. It's basically like the sports stories of 25 of Ireland's best female athletes. And it's kind of inspired after that chat that I'd had with Ivana. And it's basically like the fairy tale stories of these girls, for young girls to know that this is the life that they can have. But a lot of their stories actually started on the streets with boys. And that's the amazing thing. For most of these girls who have gone on to have these great careers, they started just as my kids and your kids do, out on the street playing, and they don't see anything different with it. It's society that has taught them that something is different. It's not kids. So the best thing that we can do is just let them play and let them learn off each other and try not to get in the way of that.
Well, thankfully, I think society to some degree has changed. I mean, when we were growing up, both you and I mean, you could probably count in one hand the kind of the women role models in sports that you have. But nowadays, it's a vast amount of women that are there as a role model. And even yourself, Jacqui, what you do, what you've achieved in your life, in your career, I'm sure I know for a fact that there's women and young girls looking at you and saying, someday I want to be like her. So it's important, I think, for people like that to have role models.
But that's hugely important. You're absolutely right. Because when I was a kid, Sonia O'Sullivan was my role model, and she was the one because she was visible. I mean, she was a world champion, but she was a girl from Cork, which I am. You know, she was like just a runner. She just started on a track, and all of a sudden she became a global superstar. But the reason everybody in Ireland knew who Sonia was because her races were on TV. Her name was in the newspaper. You saw her being interviewed. There wasn't that many other female athletes who had that kind of profile at the time. Whereas you're absolutely right. Now you turn on the TV and you're just as likely to see Stephanie Roach on the TV, or Ciara McGeehan, or Kelly Harrington, or Katie Taylor. You know, there's so many of them there now who now have a platform, and that does make a difference. And I guess you're right. Even in my job, when I started, I liked Sue Barker. I always thought she was a real, because she'd been an athlete and then she went into it. I just kind of thought she knew what she was talking about, and people took her seriously immediately. Whereas I think for a lot of other women, when they were coming in, a lot of people asked the question, oh, well, what did she play, or what did she do? Whereas I don't know if they ever did that with Des Lynam, for instance, you know. Whereas I do think now, if you turn on your television, you see, like, let's say myself, or Joanne Cantwell, Evander Quillen, Sinead Kassan, Marie Crowe, Claire McNamara. There's so many female broadcasters, and even in the UK there's loads of really good ones as well. And I do think for young girls now, they probably recognize that's absolutely a career I could have, which I think is a brilliant thing. And I'm always getting contacted by young girls in school and in college who are doing their thesis on different things, and girls making the breakthrough. And I love to see that, because it means that lots more of them are thinking about it as a career too.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. 2011, you of course you married Shane, but there was, before we get into the marriage with Shane, There was a very evident empty seat at the top table that day at the wedding, and that, of course, was your brother Sean. He passed away 6 months previous to that.
Yeah, and look, I mean, yeah, I think any family that's been through grief will know how difficult it is to lose somebody who you love. And I mean, it's so unexpected, because for us it was like, you know, he died in a car crash, so you don't have that time to say goodbye, or you don't, it's just like suddenly somebody is just not there. And like, it's a huge amount of grief for any family to go through. But I think anybody who's ever gotten that phone call, you remember everywhere you were, you remember the moment you received it, you remember exactly what was said, you remember the journey home that seems endless. And you remember when you finally get there and you walk in the door and you see your mom and dad, and it's the worst feeling in the world, because you know that life is never going to be the same. So for us, like, it was just incredibly difficult. You know, every moment since then has been very, very difficult. But I think the best thing for us as a family is knowing that we got through it, first of all, but also we had this, you know, so 2 nights before my brother died, he had sat down with my mom and had one of those life conversations, which most 25-year-old boys never have with their parents. And he just talked to my mom about all the things that he wanted to be in life. And they came up with this thing that later became known as Sean's bucket list. And he just wrote down all the things that he wanted to be in life, you know, and just, I suppose, how many times do you ever have those conversations with anybody where you say, look, this is what I want, these are my life ambitions? But the fact that my mother took out a piece of paper and a pen and wrote them down, you know, it just, I don't know why she did that, but it really was the makings of us as a family, because we had things on there just like run a marathon, you know, do a triathlon, become a world superbike champion, become a millionaire. Some of the things were very achievable, some of them are not so much, but what it did give us was a sort of a template to build on, and then just to start working our way through it as a family. And after Sean's bucket list was born, suddenly everybody wanted to get involved. Like, we had people from Eugene Laverty, who became a world superbike champion, who had been friends with my brother. The first time he won on the world circuit, he took out a Sean's bucket list t-shirt and showed it to the world's media and was like, I'm dedicating this to Sean Hurley. And like, everybody got involved, and it gave people a purpose, which is really weirdly comforting. It's actually lovely, because in grief in Ireland in particular, I mean, you see it now with the pandemic, how many people want to go to visit funerals just to be there for families. But the biggest thing for us was that people made that decision that they wanted to get involved in Sean's bucket list just because they wanted to help us, and it's given us great strength.
And it's brilliant. And of course, I think the Irish community, so the local community from where you're from, will always put the shoulder to the wheel when something like that happens, you know. I imagine in Ballinhassig was fantastic, and your friends and family all over the place. As you said, the bucket list you done, Jacqui, you done some crazy stuff in it. Like, you ran a bar for a night. The day after the wedding, you done the Cork City Marathon.
Yeah, and it was one of those things that we just thought, look, are people going to think we're absolutely mad? But like, then we just threw it out there as part of our wedding invitations. We just said, look, lads, we're thinking about doing this. You're all aware. And because it was only 6 months before the wedding that Sean died, lots of people were wondering, were we going to go ahead with the wedding? Were we going to cancel it? And then we had just said, look, lads, we've had such a dark time. We need to have a good time now. So we just said to people, look, we're going to do this. And then the minute we threw it out there, everyone was like, yeah, I'll do a mile. I'll do a mile. I'll do a mile. So we thought, we needed 26 people to do a mile each. And we thought, oh, sure, look, we might scramble to get 26, but it'll be grand. We had over 100 people saying, look, we'll run a mile. And then on the day, sure, loads of people just kept running. Like, loads of our pals, sure, I suppose they were so fueled by alcohol, they were probably still drunk, God love them, but they just kept running. Like, and there was loads of people, because we had the bucket as well. We carried the bucket and we all had t-shirts. And then loads of people who were down at the marathon, I suppose they'd heard us talking about it and they knew about it. So there was a huge amount of encouragement on the day. And it was actually the perfect end to such an abnormal weekend. But it really just, it rounded off the whole thing so well, because everybody was able to get involved, and there was no, I suppose, people, again, they get weird around grief, they don't know what to say, but the fact that people had a purpose that weekend, that they said, look, we're going to go to the wedding, we're going to have as much crack as we possibly can, and then we're going to run the marathon, and we're going to be there for our friends. And it was absolutely lovely.
But I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it. Like, even though there was a tinge of sadness with the marathon and everything, there was a lot of happiness as well, which is important.
Yeah, and look, I think you do need to give people something bright to focus on. Because, I mean, as you right said, you've seen this with your own family, your wife's family. Like, you know, people need a positive focus, because otherwise you can get down. Grief can bring you down to such a dark place that it's hard to get out of. And if you don't find something to focus on, it can swallow you up. And I kind of found with our family, having something like that was such a positive focus, it really changed the game for us. Because particularly for my mom and dad, they were at home in the house, my brother lived with them. For them to be able to turn that into a positive, like even since then, one of the things that my brother wanted to do is he wanted to set up a riding school, and my mom and dad have been able to do that. Like, they set up their own motorbike team 109,
Wow.
that now races on the world circuit. And again, it's complete focus for my mom and dad to have, where they feel like they're honoring his memory, but other people can contribute to it as well, and they can do it in a really nice way, where they're just there, or they're supporting the team, or they're watching the team, but they're thinking about Sean. And that's the important thing for us.
And I think that's the one thing, as you say, that of course, you and your family will never forget Sean, but the fact that there's a team there now dedicated to him, that'll go on forevermore, you know, please God, hopefully.
Totally, because every time I see 109 in the paddock, I know Sean is there watching. You know, like, what better way to, I suppose, emulate somebody than seeing even Una McGlinchey won the British title last year. And like, I'm sure Sean, like wherever he was watching, must have been bursting with pride seeing, you know, Team 109 on top of a podium and doing that in his honor. Like, I just don't think there is a better way to honor somebody's memory and their legacy. And like, even in Mondello, like, I meet people all the time through my job, and who say, oh, I knew your brother, or I saw him race, and Jesus, he was brilliant, and all this. And even in Mondello, you know, like for their awards night, there's an award named after Sean and all that. And I that kind of stuff really does mean a lot to us, because it means that, you know, even all these years later, that he's still being thought of. And I do think that that's a lovely thing for my parents as well.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely agree with you. Anyway, moving on there, Jacqui, 2014, then Luke was born. That was a big thing for yourself and Shane.
Yeah, and like, I mean, he's like he was a mini Sean when he came along as well, big blondie head and a big smiley little lad as well, which was an unbelievable boost to our family. It probably caught my mom and dad by surprise a little bit, just how much he looks like him, and kind of how a lot of his mannerisms that he would have. But like, I definitely took that as a positive thing. But having kids changes your life. I mean, you know that as much as I
Mm.
do. Like, suddenly your whole world is focused around them, and how much they do. And just, I guess, watching him grow and seeing what a little boy he has become, it's amazing. Parenthood is something that you're never prepared for, because, you know, kids don't come with a manual either. Like, suddenly you're like, Jesus, I'm responsible for this human. Like, but they really are, like, they're the fulcrum of our life now, you know.
2 years later, then you of course, the Olympics was on, and that was massive for you to get to go over to the Olympics.
Yeah.
But in the back of it all, though, you had, of course, you had the Zika virus that was rampant in South America at the time. Did that play on your mind as broadcasters? Not just you, but the other guys that were with you were traveling over.
Yeah, it definitely did. It was a big concern. Myself and Shane had a huge amount of chats at the time as well, because we were worried that, I guess, look, like any family, we were thinking about having another baby as well. And we'd heard so much about the Zika at the time that we were just slightly worried that maybe it wasn't the right decision. But like, we armed ourselves with as much information as possible. Like, I read up every single book that was printed on the Zika virus, I'd say, at the time. And then, look, the more and more we read about it, the more we made the decision that, look, everything was going to be okay. And we decided to go. Thankfully, everything was fine when we went there. And when we came home, then we got, you know, straight back into kind of planning for our family. And then we were able to have Lily then the following year, which completed the family unit. And she is absolutely dynamite. You know, I mean, Luke is a lovely, happy little lad. He's very placid, and she's the complete opposite. She's absolutely crazy. And God love Shane when we get older, because she is going to break his heart. But she's dynamite. She really is. She's completed the family now, and we're just, yeah, like, we're just having great crack with them. Like, that's the thing. Watching them grow is the best part of this pandemic.
And I think, yeah, you just hit the nail on the head there. I think more parents staying at home with their kids, and they're interacting more with their kids during this pandemic, which is, it's probably one of the positives that you can take out of it. I saw a picture somewhere. It might be on your one of your social media accounts. Shane and Lily and himself, Luke, were stretching out in the lawn or something. They were doing their stretches.
Oh yeah, listen, he runs a very tight ship around here now, Daddy Daycare. When he's doing the fitness regime, he gets stuck in now pretty quickly. They're all at it every morning. But look, to be honest, like we're always like the best thing about it is we're always outside with them. The weather these days has been absolutely unbelievable. The kids are mad for sport, they're mad for activity, thank God, which is great because both of us are as well. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the time that we've gotten with them has been so incredibly crucial because you can't get that time back. Like, I mean, all
No,
the
no, you
time that
can't.
I wouldn't like to say you wasted in work, but you miss out on a huge amount of their life while you're away from it. So definitely getting to be at home and just seeing the way they interact with each other and all that extra time has been amazing. And I genuinely wouldn't swap it for the world.
Yeah, that moves me on to the next part. You've spoken openly about having working mother's guilt, and do you think that you're dealing with that better now than you did back when Luke was born at the start? Normally you should be working every weekend now, so I mean,
Yeah, I look, I think the big thing, a couple of years ago is, I suppose, working every single weekend, you're away from your family, you're missing out on so much. And for Shane, he was kind of single parenting on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, he was out in the green with them constantly and I wasn't there. Whereas I do think now with the pandemic, you are kind of recognizing a lot more, look, this is more time that I'm getting with them and I can do this and I can kind of have my cake and eat it too now, I'm still able to manage everything, but I guess we're living in a different world, but it has probably made me appreciate the other side of life a little bit more. I'm now getting a lot of Saturday and Sunday afternoons that I never had with them. Now, the kids are probably home more than they would be in real time as well. So maybe
mm,
it's not a full normal picture that I'm looking at, but I'm definitely adapting my perspective on it all. That's for sure. And listen, I think the pandemic does that to everybody. I think we're all reevaluating our lives, and do we spend too much time in traffic? Are we getting the most out of our family life? Could we be doing more with our kids? I think all of us are having those conversations. For me, I've definitely seen the positives in it because I do think the balance of our lives is a little bit better. And these are the things that I would like to keep post-pandemic. But look, you never know. We could all run straight back to our normal lives that we never thought we were going to do. But I'd like to think that we'd have a bit more balance.
yeah, no, definitely, because I think a lot of people will reassess what way their lives are ran after all this lifts again. Um,
Mm.
2018, then, of course, I know you're a Cork woman living in Dublin, but you have to have some streak of Limerick in you when Limerick lifted the All Ireland, the Lee McCarthy 2018.
I tell you, I had tears in my eyes. God, after Dolores O'Riordan had died that year, and then next thing you hear Dreams being belted out, and I'd be a big Cranberries fan. I don't think there was a dry eye in the house. I mean, it was just one of those poetic moments, and it was the way that they did it as well. You just, everything that came at them, every wave, they fought it off, and like they were just such a complete team to watch. It just was absolutely magnificent. And then I suppose, like I was a child in the 90s, so we all remember, the nearly men, and like how many brilliant Limerick hurlers, Gary Kirby, Kieran Carey, that never won an All Ireland. And like I'm sure we could say this about so many, like there's plenty hurlers in Waterford who probably feel the same way as well, but I definitely always had, when you marry Limerick man and you understand the despair that people have gone through as well, but just being there on that day and seeing the way that they were, like, it was just unbelievable to watch. And then look, getting to know them in the aftermath of it, God, what a phenomenal team. And I just think the way John Kiley managed them, the way that they just all, they like the fact that that cup didn't go into pubs, it went to pitches. I just love the whole ethos that this is the way that John wanted to manage it, that he wanted kids to get their hands on the cup so that they could feel something that young Limerick kids had never felt, in previous decades. And I just thought that whole message was so lovely for kids, because it's the way that I would have wanted to grow up.
Yeah, no, he was brilliant the way he did that, in fairness to him. Last year, then, Jacqui, yourself and Shane and two more of your family, you went on as the celebrity fittest family.
Oh Jesus, God, it was. If you asked me 14 times would I do it again, I would say 13 times no, and probably the last time, Irish, sure, go on,
Go
we'll
on,
give it a
go on, I'll
chance.
do
But
it.
like, it, Yeah, I'd be a bit like that now. Do you know, I mean, I made a couple of fatal errors. One was that they obviously caught me on a very good day when I said yes to doing it. Then I was on the piss at the Galway races for the week before it and literally landed straight down to it, which was a terrible decision.
Not good.
And then lastly, sort of not having an idea of what was actually ahead of us. Because you think in your head, sure, listen, I'm fit enough, I'm grand, it'll be fine. And then you arrive there and you realize, oh Jesus, like what am I facing into? This is horrific, and I'm hungover and I haven't done any training. So it was like hell on earth for a few days. It was called Hell and Back, but it properly was hell on earth. But look, we had a great laugh. We raised a bit of money for charity. And in fairness, the Heffernans be good pals of ours. So we had a great bit of slagging with them as well. It was good crack.
Brilliant. But of course, it's called hell on earth for a reason, hell and back or whatever it's called. But
totally.
But you done brilliant, in fairness to you.
Yeah, and actually, do you know what? We probably surprised ourselves. Well, I surprised myself. In fairness, like Shane was treating it like it was the Olympics. In fairness, I think he was actually like full on training for it. But, yeah, exactly. But it was, do you know what? Look, it was a great thing to do as a family as well, because how many opportunities do you get to do that kind of thing? So we just thought, you know what? Let's get stuck into this. We'll have a great laugh. And actually, in fairness, when I look back on it, we actually did do quite well. And it was a really good bonding experience. We had a great laugh with the lads, and it was really, really good crack. And like I said, if you ask me, I would say I would never do it again. But looking back at it, I'm glad we did it, if that makes sense.
Brilliant. No, it does perfect sense. Just two more questions, Jacqui, for you before we finish up. The first question is, what does Jacqui Hurley plan for the next 10 years? What's the dream for you? If you could have the dream job within RTE in the next 10 years, what would it be?
Oh God, I suppose it's probably changed over the years. If you'd have asked me that 10 years ago, I probably would have said, like doing TV anchoring, like, the soccer, the Sunday game, that kind of stuff. That would have always been my ambition. But I think the longer you go into it, the more you kind of realize that everything is so fluid, and doing a bit of this and a bit of that is actually probably a nice balance. Like I kind of like the idea now where I get a bit of radio on a Sunday, I get a bit of news during the week. I'm doing a lot more soccer anchoring, which is something I'm really passionate about. So if you put a gun to my head and said in 10 years time, if it wasn't that different to what you were doing now, I'd probably be happy. Like I've been doing Sunday sport now for 12 years. If I could continue doing that for another 10, that'd be a very long legacy for me to be leaving. Like God only knows, they could boot me out of the chair next week, but like it's lovely to be able to have that kind of body of work behind you that you can say, look, this is very much my show now and part of my identity and what I do. So I'd love to continue that and do that for another 10 years. That'd be great. And then I guess, look, continue to do more anchoring, do a bit of that. I've really enjoyed that. The other thing that I have liked doing is just kind of stepping outside the sport box a little bit and doing a bit more of the entertainment stuff. Like I did Up for the Match last year, which was great crack, and just getting to do a bit more that kind of thing where you're getting to have a bit of a laugh, and kind of sometimes people see you in that box of like that sport box and they think that that's who you are. But sometimes it's nice to kind of be able to show, look, I do a bit of this as well, and I can have a bit of a laugh. That stuff is definitely on my radar too. And you had a pretty amazing Rio. I mean, look, the country has kind of fallen in love with you. I think you can feel that, Gary, can you?
Yeah, loads of people take photos of us, like.
That happens.
He was saying he hasn't bought a drink since he came back here, so I think that's country love, that is.
That's real country love.
Yeah.
You got a pretty special honour, though. You got to carry the flag in the closing ceremony. That must be lovely.
Yeah, unreal, yeah.
While that was going on, you were winning a world title. Great summer.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
Which would rate higher? The Olympics or going back and doing the World Championships?
I would like the Olympics only comes around every 4 years, so that's a pretty special one, and I suppose I got to do it with my brother too, which is quite nice. But at the same time, we lost the bloody thing, like.
We didn't win.
It's not ideal, like.
People think we're Olympic champions or something. We're not. We won one event this year, and everyone seems to forget about that.
Yeah, the Europeans. Yeah, you're European champions. Would you prefer to get more credit for your European medal?
I don't know.
All right, let's go on with the quiz.
I didn't have a point to make there. I was just talking to you for the sake of it.
Just for the crack. All right, let's forget about the talking for the sake of it for a minute. Gary, read that.
Yates.
Do that. Down the line. Straight down the barrel.
All right. Are you going to play it? Yates,
I'll push over.
You get over to it now. Count me down there, so. Yates and George Washington are all racehorses, but neither has won the Irish Derby. As far as we know, Donald Trump has never run in the Irish Derby. But watch this space.
Beautiful.
The beauty about it as well is that you look so relaxed and you look so comfortable doing it. You know, it kind of comes natural to you.
Well, look, hopefully that's the case, because that's certainly the way it is in real life. You know, like those kind of things. Like I'd enjoy having the crack and just sitting there. If we were in the pub, that's kind of the way I'd be like. So hopefully that comes across too.
Do you think Liverpool are going to lift the trophy this year?
100%. Listen, Jesus, if they don't now, somebody's going to storm that cup and take it, because, like, look, I mean, if you're a Liverpool fan and you've been waiting all these years, and then suddenly somebody says to you, "Oh, look, this title is null," and listen, so are we. But like, you know, if somebody comes and says to you, "Listen, this whole season is null and void," it's absolutely ludicrous. Like, I mean, last year you can't have the run that they had and then not win the season, and like then for them to go again this year, to come back after the season that they had last year, albeit obviously I know they won the Champions League, but the Premier League is the one that they really, really wanted. And then to go this year, if they don't get the trophy this year, it'll be an absolute daylight robbery. Like they need to move heaven and earth for that to happen, for that trophy presentation. Like I have friends of mine that have booked flights and everything to go over, and they're having serious worries about what will I do? Is there going to be virtual celebrations? What can I have? Because look, for a lot of people, this is their whole childhood that has been building to this moment.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Because even
the one thing is, Liverpool have earned the title. There's no other way of saying it, you know. So even if I do think, look, the Premier League looks like they've got something going now where they're going to sort this out and they're going to be able to play, and Liverpool are going to win it legitimately. But either way, they are the champions of the year.
Two more games, Jacqui. Just 2 more games. They can call it off then after that.
Exactly. Let them at it after that.
Exactly. My last question, Jacqui. If you had the power to go back in time, what would you tell a 12-year-old Jacqui? What advice would you give a 12-year-old Jacqui Hurley?
Oh, God, it's funny. Like, I suppose in some ways, I'd probably just say keep calm and stay the course. You know, it's one thing just of, you know, life has so many twists and turns that you just don't really know. And it's the unknown that sometimes is the power to challenge you. That's kind of where the fun is. It's like where you sort of get that moment of where will I choose? It's like the stuff. So I think for me, it would just be to tell myself, look, have the kind of courage of your convictions and just go with it. Don't worry about it, because the right decision will always find its way. And so I've always been lucky that I think my parents have always instilled in my kids. And if I was looking back to my 12-year-old self, that's probably what I'd say. The only other thing really that sometimes strikes me is I probably feel in some ways I probably didn't get as much out of myself in those years that I would like to have. You know, obviously sport was a big part of it, but like I do think when you're in those formative teenage years, they are the ones that can make you decide, particularly when it comes to sport, how far do you want to take it? Whereas like I probably could have done more in those years that would have ensured that my career might have lasted longer, but it didn't mean as much to me then. It actually didn't, because I was just arrogant way. I just mean that's the way it was. And I very much treated sport as something that I could just pick up whenever I wanted to. And it was only later in life that I kind of thought if I had have learned those lessons when I was younger, that I'd have worked harder. This career could have probably lasted longer, probably it could have got me more. And that's the only thing that I probably would change from the sporting perspective. And it's funny because I see look, maybe everybody doesn't get the golden ticket, but it's definitely something that would be in my mind.
Brilliant. No, Jacqui Hurley, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you tonight. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down and have a chat with me.
Not at all. Delighted to do it.
Brilliant, Jacqui. Jacqui, thanks a million.